call. And we'll start with Dylan McDowell. Present. Alan Alexander? Not here, right? Woody Dukes?
Present.
Rick Hartwig?
Present.
Al Holland?
I'm here.
Joan Lloyd?
Here.
Debbie Miller?
Here.
Excellent. Are all here, so Alan is the only one missing. We do have a quorum, and so we will continue to move forward. And sorry, I did not wait for you to get all that live for you. We're good? Okay, cool. First item on the agenda is the approval of the March 2024 minutes. Apologies, these were sent out a little bit late. But assuming you've all had a chance to take a review of those, we'll go ahead and still maintain or entertain a motion to approve those.
Move to approve the minutes. Second.
You motion by Dylan, second by Rick. Any edits or changes or comments on the minutes? All right, with that, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Item number 3 is public comments. And this is time for public comment for any items not listed on the agenda. Currently, is anyone here to talk about non-agenda items?
Where should I stand?
If you can come to the podium, that would be great. Thank you. Let us know your name.
So I'm Lynn Takata, I live in Ward 1. I think maybe this is the only meeting I could come just from the garden with my dirty hands to the West Englewood Park. And I'm just here to encourage the city to work with the neighborhood associations before planning events in a neighborhood park that can potentially damage the park. So I think we have things under control right now with Mylan Davis, but we the Native Plant Society of Oregon has said that Englewood Park is one of the finest urban wildflower locations in urban locations in Salem and in the valley. So we've been working, Rob was here at the very beginning, along with Patricia and a lot of other partners. We've had thousands of people work on the park, but there's a scavenger hunt planned, and there was supposed to be a lot of activities in the garden, but at this time we have hundreds of native plants that are just emerging from the ground. So it's a poor fit, poor timing, we weren't notified. And, you know, we're just hoping that in the future, there's better communication, you know, about events like that, because I've invited every child at Englewood Elementary School, worked with over 300 children to do stewardship projects in the park. So strongly believe in environmental education. The principle is all about teaching children about what is stewardship. You know, what does that mean? So we're fostering that at a really young age. The teachers are saying it connects with their curriculum, so we're going to do that again. But it was a little bit of a shock to find there was going to be a scavenger hunt, and now it appears to be going to be planned in an area of the park where the garden is not. So I'm not sure how that can happen, but I know that one of the park's planners didn't even know about the event himself, and he was quite shocked that no one had communicated with him. So anyway, that's my public.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up from the board on that at this point? All right. Is anyone else here for public comment on any items not on the agenda? And if you have not yet, I have sign-up sheets for some public comment on agenda items. If you have not signed up and you would like to provide public comment, there are sheets over there. So please make sure you fill out your name so we can get you on the list for that. All right, seeing no additional public comment, we will move forward to agenda item number 4, the city council liaison update. Councilor Varney,
Thank you.
the floor is
Will you go up
yours.
there?
If that would.
Either way, does that
great.
work?
Either way, whatever makes you most comfortable, that might
Okay.
work best for everyone to see.
That works probably better for everyone.
Good to see such a great turnout here. I won't take up too much of your time. I'm Nikki Varney. I'm the city councilor for Ward 8, and I'm also the council liaison for the Salem Parks and Rec Advisory Board. Yeah, good to see everybody. A couple of things that have come up. Oh, I also wanted to mention, thank you for the comments about stewardship of our parks. I mean, and everything, getting the information out. One of the things that I love and I continue to enjoy as a salmon biologist is reaching out to the students in schools and getting them involved in projects in our streams and getting their hands on things and just getting people out to play and enjoy our environment and appreciate it. So on city council at the last meeting, one of the big items was the transfer of ambulance, our EMS services. We voted to, at the end of the contract we currently have with Falk to provide ambulance services, we voted to bring it back in-house into our Salem Fire Department, which is something they had back in, I think it was, well, quite a few years ago. And the reason we did that is because Salem continues to grow and Falk has not been meeting its contractual obligations in terms of response times for a year and a half. In fact, it has cost us $3.3 million in overtime to actually staff the ambulances that we own within the fire department and to have our paramedics do that overtime to fill that space. And so this was the council looked at it. There was an outside consultant that did a report and they recommended that we go to the operator ambulance model and take it back in-house. And we discussed it. And I think it's a really good move for us to do financially. One of the things I brought up at the council meeting, because this seemed to appear fairly quickly and a lot of us had questions, is I made a motion to, I wanted to see a preliminary plan of how we were going to implement this, and fairly soon by May, I think 19th or 13th, whenever our council meeting is then. And also I wanted the establishment of a steering committee to oversee the process as this gets implemented. And so those are some highlights from the last council meeting. As you know, we have a budget committee meeting coming up next week, another revenue task force meeting. I heard that at the revenue task force town hall last night that there was a really good turnout and lots of great ideas. So I look forward to hearing more about that. At the next, this coming Monday, we have a council work session on the opioid funds that the city is looking at receiving from the opioid settlements. So if you're interested in tuning into that, that's what we'll be doing next Monday. And other than that, I don't really have any outstanding updates. Other than at the budget committee meeting, we will be probably reviewing the scenarios that were introduced last month. I think the proposal is more of scenario number 1 for reductions, which I'm concerned about a number of the reductions in there. The positions at the library, and obviously reductions to the Parks Department. I'm looking forward to the staff report, which I think I'll get tomorrow or soon, about exactly more details on what those are versus what they were presented as back in last October, September. Anyway, I don't have any other questions for you all. I know I'm looking forward to the discussion today, and thank you all for the staff reports for SPRAD. They're so detailed and they provide so much information.
Great, thanks, Councilor Barney. Any questions for the councilor? Rick?
Yeah, I saw a post this morning saying a lot of the summer activities that have been canceled. Some of the some of the kid activities that they normally have in Riverfront and some things. And that bothers me a lot.
It bothers me a lot too. I saw that in our report too, for Sprab about movies in the park and
Right.
certain activities. Yeah, that's really
Now, I'm not sure how much that costs, but it can't be a huge amount. But I guess you gotta start somewhere, but cheapers.
It's really, it's a real challenge. I know there's so many of those programs that we all enjoy and so many folks that can't afford to go do things in other places. They
There's
come to
community-
the see the-
community
the
art
whole community.
Activities, you know, make
Exactly.
Salem special.
I agree. I definitely agree.
Debbie?
Hi, I have a question. One of the ideas for the revenue task force that I heard about, was, for parks and libraries with a possible park library or, I don't really know how that works. You had any discussion about that? How levy might work?
A local
to help the
option
park?
levy, it has to be renewed every 5 years and it has to be voted on by the voters, so it would have to go to the voters. Whatever rate was decided upon also would be impacted by compression. And what that means is we are, all the schools, the county, the city, everything, all the rates are limited to, I think, a 10% rate. And once that 10% rate is hit, for something else to come into that, the others all have to take a reduction. And also that rate may be reduced to keep it under that compression level that was established. I think it was by measure, I don't remember, 5, whichever, 5. One of them. Anyway, and so because of that, it's a bit of a challenge. And also Marion County is at compression, Polk County is not. I don't know how that impacts that, but we've been receiving some information on it. I'm sure we'll have further discussions about that because I think it's a fairly popular option that's being put forward by a lot of folks in the community that I've heard.
Just some thoughts on that, Debbie, right? So like I serve on the revenue task force, so that's something we could talk about within SPRAB as well, perhaps is as that task force comes forward, that might be those budgetary decisions and discussions, revenue for the parks are in terms of our role in making recommendations to the city council. That's maybe something we could explore further at some point. Dylan?
Yeah, thank you for all your work, and I guess a little bit of a comment, but just thinking about all the custom library proposals and how much public rallying there's been, which is fantastic. And trying to think a little bit about how we help people be more aware of some of the park cuts as well. And so kind of would open that up to your thoughts of how do we help people realize with some of these budget cuts, is how many things could be shut down or impacted, like bathrooms and access and movies in the parks and kids relays. And I think one thing I've noticed is I think we have done a really good job. The Parks Department has done a really good job with small amounts of money. So the SPIF grants, over 10 parks got, or over 10 projects got supported. We have new things that we can promote. We have the bond, which great things are happening, which is wonderful. And I think trying to help communicate that for both council and the public, I think that all these great things are happening, but there's all these really challenging things that are going to happen as well that are going to impact us. And so just, it's a little bit of a narrative piece, but I think it's something I've been thinking about. I'd be curious from your perspective on council of how we make folks aware that, parks, it's not like there's a bunch of money in parks. A lot of this was baked into the 10-year bond or the SPIF grant, which is only $60,000 every year. And helping realize there still is a very big need for continuing the parks funding for these programs like Rick was mentioning with kids and whatnot. Curious if you have any thoughts there, just something I'd love to keep exploring in terms of how we articulate all this to council.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And yes, it's very important to communicate both what we're doing and also what we're looking at in terms of those challenges. The city does provide, we reach out to social media, we have all email lists, we have all kinds of things. And so we're always looking for more suggestions. We having the communication position filled, and Elizabeth will probably be sending out information on parks stuff. I think it's really important from my perspective that when something pops up on Facebook or something that is maybe is a little bit of misinformation, that we step out and address it. I mean, that happened at the library with the library being closed. And yes, the closure a closure of our library was one of those included in one of those options, but it's not in option number one. And so we discussed that a bit at the last council meeting at the beginning. I just saw something come out last night on Facebook about positions being eliminated at the library. And there hasn't been a decision about that yet, but that wasn't clear. So it's important to get the correct information out there.
Absolutely.
I think also, as Tony mentioned, your good work there. I have a question to clarify about the local option levy consideration. Is that the same thing as if a separate independent taxing district was formed that would provide money for Parks and Rec as well as library? Or is that a separate kind of thing?
I think the district's separate, isn't
Yes.
it,
Yes.
from that? Yes.
In terms of the taxes that we impose, it is functionally similar. But in terms of the administration and the governance of that, it would be different.
What I'm asking, is it possible to create a new taxing district for those purposes? And is that different than a local
Yes,
option?
yes, it would be permanent rather than
Is
having.
the revenue task force considering or looking at that kind of a possibility to raise money?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
All right, and I think those budget discussions, we will be hearing more about that, and certainly open to thoughts from the group about what those options might be and how we as SPRAD can kind of play a role in that discussion. Certainly my role on the revenue task force, I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on that and how we can bring that forward. All right, moving on to agenda item 5, board items and presentations. First up, we have the Minto Island Conservation Area Restoration Grant application to the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. We're turning this over to Jeff.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. I am Jeff Johnson. I'm a natural resources planner in the Public Works Department. We are currently applying for a grant to Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. We are requesting approximately $550,000 in funds to help us do continue restoration work within the Minto Island Conservation Area, specifically Phase 3. We are currently just wrapping up some work in Phase 3 that was funded through a Meyer Memorial Trust grant. Due to COVID and the difficulty of the site and a few other issues, we didn't get where we wanted to get with that first grant. So the site still needs some inputs and some improvements to get that floodplain forest where we need it to be, as well as controlling the invasive species. So our hope is that SPRAB will provide us with a letter of support for this to include in our application. The application is due on April 29th. This area, Phase 3, is about 48 acres. About 20.5 of those acres are nice, intact riparian forests. It does have issues with invasive species coming into that area. The remaining 27.5 acres are really limited in the native vegetation that's present. So that's an area where we require more planting versus just the 20.5 acre where we are proposing just to control weeds. Part of this importance of Phase 3 is that we have 2 other restoration phases planned for the park in the future. One is Phase 4, which is basically this area up here minus the Salem Audubon property. And then Phase 5 is kind of this wetland area here in the middle. And to access Phase 4, we have to go through Phase 3 to get there. And so one of the things we're also including in this is to create using the existing berms to allow access to ATV for our crews to get back there. The match is 25%, and so for $550,000, the match would be $137,500 over 5 years, which is $27,500 a year, which would be covered by staff time and in-kind match for the grant. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Jeff?
I'm just curious what you're doing in Phase 2.
So Phase 2 in the slough.
In what?
Sure. So Phase 1 was done before I got here, but basically it was similar, invasive control primarily in this area. There had been plans to possibly do some things with this Douglas fir forest. But it was decided that by doing those things, we were just gonna create a much worse problem for the weeds that are there. So this area has been completed for a few years. Phase two, we just completed in this last year. We had money and it was able to carry over. We were treating Uruguayan water primrose, which is also known as Ludwigia, which is an invasive plant, often comes from aquariums and other things that's been found in the Willamette River. Like 75% of the slough used to be covered with this plant. And so we've knocked it back to the point now where we don't believe we need to use herbicides anymore. So we are working with folks to set up hand removal of the Ludwigia in there. And so we've seen a lot of improvements in the habitat. There was also in phase two, there was some minimal planting of riparian vegetation and aquatic vegetation around the edges there.
That's right, Jeff. All right, well, if no more questions, I will entertain a motion advancing the recommendation that is on the agenda.
I move that SPRAB write a letter to endorse the grant application.
So moved for whatever it is you're saying.
Go for it, Dylan. Dylan's spelling it out.
I move that SPRAB write a letter in support of the grant application to the Oregon Watershed.
All right, any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Say aye. Anybody opposed? All right, excellent. We'll take that authorization and I'll work with staff to get that, that letter completed as well.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, next up is item 5B, which is the proposal about renovations and improvements to Willamette University Baseball Stadium and the Tokyo International University of America Softball Stadium. And so we have Rob Passage from Willamette University, Luke Manuel from Salem Baseball Club, and Laura Tiffin from Public Schools to talk about that. So for this, we have a number of folks who have signed up for public comment on this. What we will do is we'll have the presentation here, and then we will open it up for public comment. I will go through the agenda item or the list of folks that I have here in order. We will have just about 3 minutes for everybody to provide a maximum 3 minutes to comment. You can do it sooner, that's better, or quicker, that's better. And then we will have an opportunity for board questions following the public comment, board questions of Rob, Luke, and Laura. I also want to note that this is not, this isn't a city project. We are not actually taking any action on this item today. This is purely an informational report for the board. And so it's an informational report that will inform an opportunity for our future action. So at some point, we expect that we will be able to take an action on this item in terms of making a recommendation to city council regarding this project. But for today's purposes, this is purely informational. And that's what we've got.
Yeah.
I'll hand it over. Thank you.
I appreciate you explaining how this is gonna work, because I was wondering who was gonna talk, what we were gonna do. You got it first. That is helpful. My name's Rob Passage. I'm the Director of Athletics at Willamette University. And just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to come here today and talk to you about where we are in this project. And again, I think, as we know, will be, hopefully future conversations and those type of things. I also wanted to ask other folks that are here with me to stand and introduce themselves as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Tiffin. I'm with Salem Kaiser Public Schools as the coordinator of athletics and activities.
Luke Emanuel with the Salem Baseball Club.
So I apologize in advance if you get to listen to me today. Primarily, this is a Willamette University project, so I'll be kind of presenting and talking through what we're doing. But Luke and Laura both are representing users, potential future users of this space, and we've been talking for 2 years about how we can help bring turf, softball, and baseball, the need for, and what we can do to bring turf, baseball, and softball fields to Salem. And so I thought it was important that they're here, probably able to answer some questions that folks may have as we go. So I want to go to the next slide. So just want to introduce the project a little bit. So it's, as this started and where we are now, the general hope of the project is that we're going to install synthetic turf, sports lighting, and protective netting at Willamette University's baseball and softball. Right, so that is the the general, where we started and kind of the general overall theme. I think as it was mentioned in the notes, the baseball field located off of Mission Street on the north side of property owned by Willamette, this is the north side of Bush Park. And then the softball field located on campus behind the train station, as you can see, on property that's actually owned by Tokyo International University. Our conversation today, I know we don't really have to talk about the softball field. I know our conversation will focus on baseball, and that's fine. But I just wanted to give folks kind of an idea of all that we're trying to do. Make sense? Next slide. So those three main pieces of the project, and again, this is really kind of informational. I know we'll get to the stuff that really impacts park in a second, but artificial turf, as we looked at it, is about playability. For folks that live in Oregon, you understand that during portions, sometimes larger portions of the year, rains make softball and baseball very challenging. We're hoping to have artificial turfs that increase the playability of those fields. I had a soccer coach that we just hired that came from San Diego. He asked me today, it's going to be like this the rest of the spring, right? I said, I hope so. We do get a little bit of rain. So flexibility also, with the baseball field and everything, we have turf that allows different activities to happen. So it's not just specific, especially in baseball, not just specific to a baseball field and a softball field. And then maintenance is a big thing as well. So I think for both of those spaces, not having to use so much water to water the grass, gas-powered vehicles to mow, and then also fertilizer and different things in that space. It's a lot less maintenance to try to keep it up. Field lighting, again, we want to add field lighting, even if we have a field that's playable in January when it gets dark at about 4:30. So we're trying to practice baseball. It's challenging us to do that when our classes get out at 4:20 in the afternoon. As we talk about other uses and potential use of the school district, right? When our practices end and they want to get out there and it's dark, we need the lighting to be able to make sure that other users of that space can get out there. Not well into the night, but we're talking about, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's fine. And then also allow some schedule flexibility. So we allow some schedule flexibility as we look at that in terms of when we're on those spaces. And the last thing, the netting, primarily spectator safety, but looking to improve the netting and actually raise the netting, and we'll get to that the next slide that'll show that a little bit. One of the things specifically at our baseball stadium, a lot of fall balls will go into the park behind up onto the ridge. This is immediately behind the park. Right now our netting is 25 feet. We want to bring that a little closer to the field and raise it up to 40 feet with the hope that we're keeping balls from going into the park and require people to go get those, chase those, and getting into those areas. So next slide. A little bit about the problems, again, as we were talking about, the problems we're trying to solve. I already mentioned on the previous one, field maintenance and playability. Those are members of our baseball team before a game. There's actually large sponges going out and sponging the field to try to make it playable. We also have a field tarp that we try to use to keep that from happening. But it takes about 30 people to move that thing. And so that is very challenging. So again, trying to do that so we can play. Turf field, you show up, you play. You don't have to sponge the field, you don't have to squeegee, you don't have to pull the tarp, those type of things. And again, balls leaving the stadium. That's a picture of our current backstack netting at 25 feet. Hoping to raise it up again to keep balls from going over the back. One of the things that we sat down and we started looking at this also is, are there any other issues as we're doing this project that we may try to hope to solve? And one of the things we identified was access at our field and people to be able to watch the games is challenging. And so super hard to get a picture that explains everything. But if you're thinking about our stadium here, there's a stairway right here that comes up. And if you're going to get into the stands, you come up here, and to access any of the seats, you come up basically that stairway and have to walk all the way across to the other side. This is a stairway on that side. It would be perfect access to get up to that side, but it's fenced in. We don't open it. It's not access, so it's not currently used. So we came up with, and then again, we've had some vandalism, a lot of graffiti on the outside, on the park side. Actually had someone camping, set a fire, keep warm right next to the stadium, got up underneath the metal sheeting, caught the building on fire. So we've had some issues around that spot. So we started to talk about, are there ways that we could work and try to solve that issue? The accessibility, trying to create more space for folks to be able to stand and watch the game, and for folks, for some traffic flow around the facility. So we go to the next slide. These are the asks that we're looking at as we look at expanding the easement that we currently have with the city onto some additional park property. And the ask is, as you can see, to expand around the south side of the stadium that would connect both sides. And it's in the red there kind of shows what we've been looking at. Fencing and a path that would go from one side to the other to connect both of those spaces, to add some additional security, to add additional flow so folks can get to both sides of the space and get to space. There would be additional ADA seating and standing room. That's what we're proposing. That would be what we would hope to do. The other part that's come from, and you can see, and I apologize, I didn't have a copy of the most current plans, but I did give folks the ones that are sitting there. If you look, the other part is by the city tennis courts that are here on that plan. We would create an additional gate, additional entrance, kind of a north entrance. Be a gate in the fence and a concrete path that would connect to an existing concrete path that goes along the outside of the baseball field and alongside the outside of the tennis courts to allow another entrance into space. That part was not something that we were considering at first. Our architects had actually drawn in some access along the south side. But actually, as we started to have conversations with folks, walked around with folks from the Parks Department, walked around with other users, with our push to encourage folks to park on the north side, use William University, use areas to the north, we thought adding an entrance at that space would create better access and better flow. So those are eventually, I apologize, I don't have better details in terms of, pictures and what those would look like. That's what our architects are working on right now to give you a better sense of what that is. But I just want to give you a sense of the why, kind of what we're looking at. That makes sense? Next slide. So a few other adjustments that we made. So I talked about, we adjusted the entrance, added that north entrance instead. Originally, when we were talking about how much of that space on the south side we would be looking at, it was, we were talking 10 to 15 feet. It's down to 8 to 10 in terms of what we're looking at. That's the minimum that we can have in order to have around the corner of the stadium that we can have for two-way traffic. And so that's where we would go, wanting to have as little impact as we can on that existing path that goes around. Our light folks had originally said we wanted to have 8 poles. That's kind of typical for a baseball stadium. And we're talking about putting them on the cross, the path that's there that follows our right field fence. We talked to them, can we reduce the number of poles? So we went down to 6. And then we're also going to adjust our right field fence. We're going to move it in so the light pole will actually be on existing property and not cross the park. And then the last thing, just as we've had conversations, we were already planning this before Sophia let us know about the 180 baseballs that she pulled off the ridge that I walked through a couple weeks ago, but just the taller netting to try to prevent balls from leaving the stadium. Is something that we've adjusted. So, and last thing, and the last thing, I think I talked about it at the beginning. The why, as we started to have conversations, and Laura and Luke and I, as we started to talk about, what are the benefits of having this? Obviously, we're going to benefit from William University. We're going to have access to these fields. We're going to be able to use turf field. It's gonna help our teams actually be able to practice where they play instead of practicing in a gym or practicing on a football field at 8 at night. That's gonna be great. But there's, what I've shared with folks, I also am the person when folks need to use spaces at Willamette, they call me and say, is this available? Is that available? And I've had to say no so many times to the school district, to other folks, to Little League, to say, hey, can we come use your baseball field? I say, no, you can't, because we can't even use it. And so we've had conversations. I think this is a great opportunity because we don't have this in Salem to create these opportunities for other groups to come and use these spaces. So these are just some of the folks that we hope can take advantage. And then, like I said at the beginning, this is just kind of an informational process. We're sharing this right now. We want to make sure we talk to you and that you're able to ask us questions. Luke and I attended the SCAN neighborhood meeting last night. They had, Victor, I still need to get you that list, but there were about 2 pages of questions that folks in the neighborhood had. And we want to answer all of them. And so looking forward to hearing your questions concerning specific things so we can address them. But we're going to go through all the processes. We're going to go through all the things that we need to do to try to make this happen. And we're very hopeful that it's something that folks will rally behind us.
Great, thank you, Rob. With that, as I said, I think our next step will be to open up public comment on this particular agenda item. And so we will start that. As I said, we'll just kind of go in order here. And so first up, we'll have Kathy Lingo.
Can we have our SCAN president lead things off, actually? Is that okay?
Yeah. I'm Victor Dodier. I'm on the second list. Yeah, that one.
I yield.
Okay. If I may. Okay, Victor, go for it. Okay.
Can we actually do, yeah, come on the way up, Victor, thank you. And we'll do
It's more for the
3
benefit.
minutes apiece.
It's more for the benefit of the camera than for the benefit of the audience because I can talk to a room. For the record, I'm Victor Dodier, the president of the South Central Association of Neighbors, otherwise known as SCAN, and I live in Ward 2. I want to give the board some background on SCAN's actions concerning the baseball concept. This, as Rob noted, this process has been going on, this discussion has been going on for a couple of years now. In July of 2022, so almost 2 years ago, the board heard a presentation by Mr. Emanuel to talk about various options for baseball, including playing at Willamette's Speckeen Stadium. And after that discussion, the board adopted a resolution that stated, and I quote, "Be it resolved that SCAN supports a collegiate summer baseball league in Salem," unquote. In October last year, we had an update presentation by Mr. Emanuel considering a non-binding, I want to emphasize that, a non-binding memorandum of understanding between the city of Salem, Willamette University, and the Salem Baseball Club. And after that presentation, the board adopted a resolution that stated, and I quote, "SCAN supports the non-binding memorandum of understanding between the city of Salem, Willamette University, and Salem Baseball Club LLC," unquote. In February, Mr. Emanuel came and gave a update presentation on the proposal. This has been an ongoing, as the proposal has evolved, ongoing presentation or presentation on the concept. Based on the board discussion after that presentation, I sent the proposal to, or the concept as it exists at the time, to our historic preservation parks and gardens committee, our land use committee, and our transportation committee for review, again, based on that February discussion. And I think you have seen the report from the Historic Preservation Parks and Gardens Committee. And last night we had a very well attended, my guesstimate would be upwards of 50 folks, 40 to 45 minute discussion with Bush Park neighbors to compile questions that neighbors and SCAN board members have about the proposal. There's a lot of overlap between what neighbors have as questions and what SCAN board members have as questions. But since many of those Bush Park neighbors have not been regular attendees at SCAN board meetings, they were kind of unaware that there is overlap, that some of the same questions are being asked. Some of the questions, and I'm only going to give you a kind of a few, some of the questions raised are global ones, and some are very specific. Just to give you a flavor,
Victor, can you, so just a 3-minute time limit, and so we're at that already, so can you hit, can you just send us that kind of lineup of questions as well?
I will do that.
Record? Thank
Okay, well, I talk slowly and clocks go fast.
Apologies, they do, but just want to make sure we have a time to get through everybody and get through our agenda. So, thank you. Next up is Jim Stembridge.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Stembridge. I live on Witter Street, 2 blocks south of Bush Park. We're familiar with the Woodbat League team in Port Angeles. It's called the Lefties. It's fun. You can go have a turkey leg and watch college kids play baseball. I'm in favor of that. I like the idea of improving the baseball field there at Bush Park. My concern has to do with nighttime activities of the Woodbat League. All of these Woodbat Leagues teams struggle to make enough money to stay in business, and that's kind of the basis of my concern on the lighting and the public address system and the alcohol sales. I hope that the recommendation that you make to the city council will limit those 3 things. The loudness, the time of day for the PA system, the limitation on the lighting, maybe till 9 o'clock. Certainly not 11. I mean, this is a quiet neighborhood right now. And then the beer sales are a concern to me because of the activity that sometimes goes along with excessive beer sales. So thank you very much for allowing me to help you make your recommendation.
Thank you, Jim. Roz Shirak? Shivak? Is that a B or an R?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Roz Sherrick. I live in Ward 2 and live at about a block south of Bush Park. And I've heard a lot of concerns from neighbors about, additional light, additional noise, traffic, parking, but and I share those concerns, but my biggest concern for the park itself and Salem residents is by adding night games, the spectators, what we've heard from the proponents is the games might run from 7 to 9:30, but then people have to leave the stadium, so it could be from 7 to 10. All Salem parks close at sunset. And even in the summer, sunset, the latest it occurs is 9:02 p.m. And of course, that's right around the summer solstice. So virtually all the games would be, people would be streaming out of the stadium after a game's over. And whether they go out the regular north entrance or a new entrance by the tennis courts, well, the new entrance by the tennis court, people would need to be walking clear through Bush Park if they park to the south. And I don't think Salem should be changing its park hours just to accommodate this. And I know the police, Salem police want that sunrise to sunset park hours because it gives them a legal handle for approaching people they see in the parks after dark and, checking them out. So it's important we keep that. And I don't think spectators attending a commercial event should be given special privilege. If they get to be in the park after sunset, all Salem people would. And I don't think we want to see Bush Park go that direction. Another concern I have is with the additional easement to the south to allow them to pave that area for access. I'm totally opposed to giving away any square footage of public park for a private university and a commercial operation to, you know, develop it the way for their own uses. And I was noticing on the pre-application conference that the Salem Baseball and Willamette folks had with the city, they not only want to add development outside of their own owned property, encroaching on public parks, but they also would be asking for a lot of adjustments. They're not even, there's a number of things that they're not going to do according to existing Salem code. Just one example is the light post, and this may change, but as far as in this documented pre-application conference, this is just one example. They want 90-foot tall light poles, which staff said, and the maximum height in that zone is 70 feet.
Roz, I gotta cut you off there.
Okay. It's that, those kinds of things I'm concerned about.
Thank you, Roz. Next up is Evan West.
Thank you, Chair Norris and members of SPRAB. I'm Evan West. I'm here as a concerned citizen, a resident of Ward 7. I also submitted written testimony that I hope has been shared with you all. Regarding the proposal to bring commercial baseball to Bush Park, today you will be confronted by two incontrovertible truths. The first truth is that everyone enjoys baseball. It's our national pastime. The second incontrovertible truth is that the land in Bush Park is not available to rent by commercial enterprise. Of these two truths, this board has an ethical and legal obligation to uphold and enforce only the latter. Mr. Emanuel and Mr. Passage, may attempt to sell you on the idea of a third truth, that the entire endeavor is for the benefit of youth sports. This is a false flag and is easily disproven by simple reasoning. To save time, this fallacy is addressed in my written testimony. Please ask questions if you have any. Bush Park and the use of land within it by Willamette University are governed by public transfer deeds. The terms of these deeds preclude the presence of commercial operations. To violate them leaves our community open to the very real possibility that the land could revert to private ownership. There is national precedent for this. This advisory board must exercise elementary caution by refusing to endorse a proposal that leaves our community vulnerable to such a catastrophic outcome. Even if we put aside the concept of Willamette making use of their facilities for non-university sports, this advisory board is obligated to reject any proposal that would expand the footprint of existing facilities in parkland or create new ground disturbance outside of the existing fence perimeter. The latest spoken proposal from Salem Baseball, as they have still not put anything in writing, indicates their desire to expand the stadium facility by 8 feet into parkland and to construct a new paved pathway that bisects the oak savanna regrowth area of the lower pasture. Advisory board members, there's no need for you to wring your hands and express concerns about wanting to maintain the park and do what's best for the community, its economy, or its children. You are duty bound to uphold the guiding doctrine that you approved with the Cultural Landscape Management Plan in 2021. That plan actually suggests that the best long-term action would be for Willamette University to relocate their facilities entirely, as they are, quote, a major intrusion into the park, unquote. Now, I do not expect that this board will seek that particular outcome, but I do expect this board will fulfill its role as called for by the Landscape Management Plan that, quote, management activities and decisions should protect and preserve the contributing resources of the park and be compatible with the adjacent historic portions of the neighborhood and respect the deed restrictions, unquote. By this directive, this advisory board is imbued with authority and obligation to uphold incontrovertible truth by stating clearly today and every day that there must be zero new expansion of the Willamette University facilities in Bush's Pasture Park because the park is not available for private business to profit from. Thank you. Any questions?
Great, thank you, Evan. Lynn, you signed up, but I think that was for your Lynn Takata.
Oh, I already.
That's what you did yours, right? Okay. Oh, you didn't have anything. Bob Munson, were you on this agenda item? Well, thank you.
I agree with the last speaker. My name is Bob Monson. I did go to Willamette. I didn't start there until 1957. And then I went a couple of years. Then I went in the Army. I came back. And I think I finally graduated about 65 or something like that. Anyway, I've always liked it there. I actually went out for baseball. And all I had to do play was to beat out a guy named Big Backlund. You ever heard of him? He was a well American. Yeah. And a very nice guy. But anyhow, the people that ran the baseball program there were, in my unreviewable wisdom, very good. And they were very polite to everybody. And they knew what they were doing. And I don't know all the facts about what this proposal is, but it has a kind of a bovine aroma about it, to me, anyway. It doesn't seem like it's reasonable for private money to be invested in a private university for the purpose of building better athletic fields. Anyway, I also think that others who spoke before me covered virtually everything I'd have to say anyway. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Kathy Lingo.
My name is Kathy Lingo, and I live about 2 blocks south of Bush Park. I had a list of things to say, but many other people have already said them, so the interest of time, I will skip over some things except to echo them. My concerns are the impacts on the park and the neighborhood. Lynn Takata spoke so brilliantly about stewardship, and that is my concern, that we need to be good stewards of the nationally recognized historic landscape. The sheer number of games and the sheer amount of use that is proposed here, not just with the Salem Baseball LLC, it's 27 games, but also many high school games and the other activities that are proposed, adds up to a very large number and a very heavy usage of a very precious park. And the amount of use and the need for parking would push out regular park users that currently use the park, especially in the summer. It's heavily used in the summer. There are people who are walking dogs. There are people who bring their children there to the playgrounds. People like me who like to come and draw or just walk. Some of us are lucky enough to walk there. A lot of people don't. A lot of people come and park. And so I believe that that is a major concern. Other than that, I just echo what other people have said. You know, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Kathy. Claudia Howells.
Got something to share, since I'm not going to read all of this, given the time limit, the fact that some of what's been said, I would be a bit redundant. I do want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I live at 1045 Cross Street, the corner of Cross and U, which, by the way, is the easternmost entrance into the park. We've been there for over 40 years. We are very well acquainted with the park usage. And I want to comment, because I know there's been accusations of NIMBYism. We have enjoyed and do enjoy and accept what is in fact a very busy park. The lower park has a lot more activity than the upper park. And so we're used to softball games and pickup soccer and volleyball and badminton and all the other wonderful things that go on there. And we are not bothered. We also know that during the summer, the lower parking lots can be packed until sundown. In fact, they're packed and they do overflow into the neighborhood, which then presents problems for adding an additional use. If you can imagine adding potentially, if Luke's successful, 600 spectators into a park that already has 500 people in it, in that lower area, that could be quite a challenge. I want to comment a minute about park staff, because over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of people. And I've had many conversations with Becky George and recently with Melinda Sparks, and they are always wonderful to work with. They have been able over many years to maintain the delicate balance between park users, park neighbors, and the natural resources of the historic park itself. And we want to make sure that that continues to happen. And as you move forward, please consult in-house. Talk to those people who are the experts about how the park is used, how the reservations are set up. I know that Melinda already has a calendar for the coming summer for the use of the lower park. Make sure you take a look at that, because that's important in judging how much more capacity the park has for people. One of the things I did on this, and if I get cut off, please read them, is a list of things that I think would be fair to ask if this proposal moves forward. More porta potties. There's no way to have enough restroom facilities in that park. And I can tell you that park staff probably has a way to calculate exactly how many porta potties are needed based on the use. Right now, if you are cross-country team, the cross-country team pays parks a fee, rental fee, and pays for the additional porta potties. And there can occasionally be as many as 12. And we know from experience, having had things happen on our fence, that even though there may be restrooms in the baseball field, you gotta have them at the parking lots too. Just especially if they've been
Thank you, Claudia.
drinking beer.
I'm gonna have to cut you off there.
Okay, so please read the rest of these and, feel free to run them by your staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, can we have Dan Simas? Say that right? Yeah. You did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also live in the neighborhood, a couple blocks just south of Bushes Park on Winter Street. And just to break this down, first part, we did this last night as well. Relative to Willamette University, increasing opportunities for youth, baseball, softball, that's a non-issue. And they could begin that right now, as far as we're concerned. And as practical matter, I think that's possible as well. The other thing is that the return of a Salem club from the West Coast League is also a good thing. In the research I just learned that Salem had such a team for about 4 years. That franchise was sold and it became the Portland Pickles. So welcome back. That would provide, more opportunity for people that love baseball to see, major league type deals. And this league is affiliated with the major leagues and they develop high-end college people. Many of them have become professional players and they've gone on to the major leagues. So that's a good idea too. The real issue with us is the location. And we believe that placing an expanding upper club, and from all indications that I've read, is that the West Coast League is expanding. There's now 17 teams. If Salem becomes another one, all over the country. So anyway, but placing that in a fragile landscape of Bushes Park is contrary, I think, to the history and the nature of one of Salem's nicest landmarks. And it's also contrary to the plan that you developed a few years ago in concert with the public and the Grand Ronde tribe and other subject matter issues. And you adopted that in 1921. And I'd suggest go back. 3 years is a long time. But I've gone through it, and I think at our last meeting, I mentioned a couple of the highlights. But the biggest challenges outlined in that plan are maintaining the health of oak, camas, and native plants, lack of adequate funding, overuse, general maintenance, and overdevelopment. And then you go on beyond that and find out what the favorite thing is for people to do. And this is a survey that you did, and I presume you did the survey to find out from your users how to allocate the resource. That's why you do surveys typically. And what you found out is that people go there to walk, 78% of them. They want to view the gardens and wildflowers, 52.5%, and so on. And then finally you get down to 13th place, they go there to watch baseball. 1.3%. Okay, so why would you reallocate a property to something that people don't want, or at least they told you that, to a very, very much degree, at the expense of the things that people want to do? And we heard last night from Councilor Shioka that next year, the city is going to have to cut back even further than it can now. And right now, as you know better than I, you don't have enough funding to keep up the maintenance that the park requires. The toilet that was mentioned earlier in the lower section is closed. We asked the assistant city manager when we were on one of Luke's tours if they could open it. I said, we don't have the money. So why do that? Now, finally, the other thing that you might want to take a look at, and Luke mentioned, is the legal thing behind the quick teams. I would encourage you to take a look at that, or have your legal staff do that. I've done that. And I've also contacted the people that have historically kept track of that, Pioneer Trust. And they believe that what is taking a private for-profit enterprise and putting it into the park is contrary to the provisions of those laws. And they reminded me it's a two-edged sword. If there's an heir out there from the Bush family, you could create a real monster. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Joan Stimbridge.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be here. My issue is that the park is a treasure for the whole community. It isn't just for the residents that live around Bush Park. It is for the whole city. And in fact, it draws people from farther away than that. And so my issue is how to make sure that people who use this park every day, certainly many times a week, don't get pushed out and have the opportunity to do the things that is only available in this park in our city. So I beg you to love the park as much as we do, and to respect the fact that everybody in this community uses that park, not just the people that walk to it. And the people who drive there, they're not from often, they're not close enough that they can walk. So they drive there to be there. So let's not push them out ever. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. I think I have called everyone up who asked to give testimony today. Is that correct? You would like to go?
I didn't sign up.
You didn't sign up. I'll allow you anyway. It's on this agenda item. Go for it.
Ellen Stevens. I lived on High Street for 40 years and followed scam and events very closely. 3 years ago, I moved to West Salem, but I'm finding it difficult to change my allegiance to Ward 8
after my loyalty to SCAM and issues there. So I'm following this carefully as a member of the Historic Preservation Parks and Garden Committee. My concern that kind of came together, coalesced just as I listened here, because I didn't plan to talk, figuring that most of the issues would be covered. I'm concerned that from what I hear, this is a plan that Salem Baseball has been working on for 2 years. And I'm realized that there's not a final proposal, and yet I'm surprised at how fluid it is, even from yesterday to today, the change. Going back in October when we walked with Brian Smith, who's, don't know his exact title, but the head of Bush Park City. We were shown that by the batting cage, an extension of 12 to 15 feet in the park would be needed. That plan changed. In February at a meeting, we were told 8 feet from the current back side of the stadium out into the park. And yesterday, when we walked with the Salem baseball people, flags were up to show us that 8-foot path. And today up here, we see that that's been changed to 12 feet, from 8 to 12 feet. So I'm wondering, I realize that this is all in the planning stages, but I'm concerned that even, I realize they're in a stage where they need to convince the opposition of their plans, so they're trying to make it look pretty good to us, but I just worry that this will continue to evolve in a way that might not meet that's been just kind of presented in a way to make it feel good for people. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. All right, that concludes our public comment period for this agenda item. And so with that, we'll open it up to the board here for questions. And so I'll call Rob back up if you're willing to do that. Free to you.
Used to be easier to get up.
And so we'll open up to the board for questions. Here we go. Debbie, I'm going to start with you, and I'll try to, if we can, as a board members, also kind of limit our time and questions here as well. Thank you.
My questions are pretty simple. I just want to know about the turf. So how long does the turf last, and what's like the environmental impact of having turf there? Is the material recycled or made from recycled, or will it have to be replaced every few years?
Typically on baseball and softball fields, there's a longer lifespan. There's portions of the field that need to be replaced. The batter's boxes, that can be every year, but you're talking pretty small spaces. The rest of the field, it's usually 12 to 15 years, and sometimes usually longer than that. I am asking for some environment. That was one of the questions that came up last night at SCAN, was if we need more of information about the environmental impact. We've had turf on our football field and then our soccer and lacrosse field for several years. There's been conversation about microplastics and different things. Our turf companies provide us a lot of research on that. We're gathering that study together. When we replaced our soccer field most recently, we did pay extra to have that turf recycled. Because they have to come in and they take it and they haul it away. I don't know what they do with it after that, but I can plan on kind of getting to the bottom of that now. As these questions.
Before we go on, so to add on to that, does anybody else have any turf related questions? Thinking of kind of going through the thematic areas that Rob laid out for us.
Just a small follow-up on what was said there. You mentioned microplastics. I know there's been some research recently around things with PFAS, forever chemicals, and there's been concerns about turf possibly having that and exposure. And so I know in some cases you could spend more for better things. Sounds like that research is being done, but kind of across the board?
Yeah, I mean, we've hired, I think it's we've hired a landscape architect to help us navigate this process, right? And we've chosen Field Turf as the turf, if we move forward, right, as the turf company. So we're relying on them pretty heavily in terms of the stuff that they're doing. I'm not the person to speak on that. Matt Fuller, who's our landscape architect, is better than that. Rob Glockner, who works with Field Turf, is probably even better. But yeah, if there's questions, I can get those answered. I'm probably not the person to talk science.
No, I think, I mean, my thought is with some of these projects, things like pavement concrete, for example, you can pay more for pervious concrete, for example. And so sometimes there's the better options that are still a little bit more expensive, but we're looking at a 10 to 15-year lifespan. It's better to put the money up front when we're thinking about youth playing in many cases here. So as long as those questions are kind of on the radar.
And that'll have to be infill too. So we're looking at what, types of infill, what environmental friendly. And we have not made that selection. Better for things, the more expensive it is. That can become a challenge.
Any other turf related questions? Any lighting related questions? And I will have like a more general question period too, but you got the lighting.
I think there was a fair number of questions on the lighting, so I'd love to just hear a response in terms of the time of that. And so if you're saying games potentially to 9:30, but then time for folks to get out, I imagine there's some lingering, potentially a cleanup period. I'm not sure, like getting the stand and everything.
Yeah.
How are you all? I imagine you've heard this a lot and responded. So could you share with us how you all are envisioning?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is I can use our example of our existing spaces, right? And so right now with our lights on our soccer lacrosse field, we have timers that are set. They have to be off at 11 o'clock. They can't be on until 5 a.m. That's not in a residential area like this. And so there are those capacities where the lights in our gym. I actually have an app on my phone where I can turn those off if they're on. Pass, so I can do that remotely. So with technologies, that's something that like we don't have on our football field. And we had a conversation with some folks yesterday about, there are times when those lights get left on. And so we want to investigate ways to set the limits on those as well. And so we haven't identified, I think as someone suggested earlier, this board could potentially put in place some light limits. We haven't identified what those would be, but those technologies are in place to set that manually. And potentially override it if something of the games on extra innings or something. So I know from a Willamette standpoint, I think I shared with someone yesterday, our coaches don't want to be there. People are worried that we're going to be there all hours of the night. Part of this is so the staff doesn't have to be there all hours of the night. Right now, they're there on the football field because they can't use the baseball field for practice because of the field conditions. This would allow, folks, everybody to get home, hopefully quite a bit.
Rob, thinking about that a little bit, in terms of the lighting, can you give us a sense, the football field being right next door, how often is that used currently?
The football field?
Yes, and in the evenings.
It's used daily. Probably the one day of the week that it's not used, is Sunday, not used, other than football goes practice. But right now, in the fall, football will practice, and then sometimes we'll have club sports that we use that space. We've tried to transition our club sports back onto campus as much as we can, both from just we can leave those lights on a little bit longer, and then also from a standpoint of travel. Our students are on campus, so we want to try to make it easier for them to get there. But this time of year, like I said, baseball will be out there, softball will occasionally come over in the evenings. Track goes till about 7 o'clock, and our football team also has spring practice. And so they have a lot of times in the last few years, they've been going early in the morning. I don't know, again, from the neighbors, I don't know if that's worse or better than the evening. But yeah, it gets used.
Woody, do you have another light question?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, this is International Dark Sky Month. And the city just Monday did the proclamation for International Dark Sky. Excuse me. If you go in about 13 minutes of Monday's council meeting, proclamations.
Yep. And so that relates to shutting off, making sure all lights are off at night.
Being the most considerate of our natural environment.
Right, particularly for migratory birds.
And insects.
Yeah. Good enough. Rick, lighting question?
No.
Okay, hold for it. Any netting questions? Debbie?
I just wondered about, netting's gonna be very high and there's a lot of owls and things in that area? At least there's some owls and birds that fly at night. And is there any concern that it's gonna start bringing birds down?
There's no. It exists, right? It exists now, and not quite that height. We've not had that situation. But I appreciate the question. And talk to our folks and see if there's something that they do in that situation. Black. I mean, again, we have 30-foot high netting around our soccer lacrosse field. We don't have that. Obviously, it's a different location. But no, I appreciate it. I will look into it. Sorry.
For what it's worth, Debbie, I caught birds in grad school using nets, so like that were strung up.
So we normally
But they're specially made for that and have pockets and they're different sizes, right? So if you get larger birds, depending on the size of the net, will just bounce off it and be fine.
we normally find this fish at the base of our light poles. The osprey.
Oh, because the osprey, yeah.
They don't worry about it.
But
That's an odd one when I walk out and I'm like.
But I think it's a good question and I have the same thought of getting an extra height in there will potentially have greater impacts on it, so. All right, any other net questions? Excellent, well, Al, you have been very patient, thank you. Continue.
Wallace Marine Baseball Complex has a lot of use through the summer. I'm interested if either Mr. Manuel or Mr. Paz could speak to the possible impact on the games that would be there. Would there be a transfer of games to this new field and therefore a loss to some of the parks programs in Wallace Marine Park or not?
You know, and I guess I would, looking at it with Salem Baseball Club, we've talked with the Parks Department about potentially doing the baseball field in a way that softball could also use it as a resource to play games there. If they are doing tournaments at Wallace Marine and then need an extra field space. So it does sort of gives you that flexibility to be another added resource for city park space.
I don't think it would replace. We get a lot of requests for teams to come practice. You know, teams that want to come and play, they're playing in a tournament, they want to come practice. That is something possible, but I don't see us displacing existing events.
Thank you.
Rick.
Yeah, this is kind of a two-part. One is to Salem Baseball, Mr. Emanuel. According to the testimony, Volcano Stadium is available. What draws you to this scenario? Why not pursue a really wonderful stadium that needs to be used? And secondly, to Willamette University, it seems like a lot of the complaints about this is the alcohol sales and that if they were to be at Volcano Stadium, that would alleviate a lot of that. But would this plan still be viable for you without Salem baseball?
It would, yes. Not to the same extent. And it would postpone, it would make it more challenging, right? So some of what is happening is as we are developing the funding and have now the funding to do this project, people are contributing for us to be able to, for future rental payments, right? And that was going to be our relationship with this school district early on until they ran into some budget challenges. And so it's never been a conversation that we would not be involving, say, baseball, be involving other organizations.
So will you be getting funds from Salem Baseball for this project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And without it, you would have difficulty with the project.
We would have to seek additional funds or we'd have to cut things from the project, right? Which would lessen the impact. And that we would lessen the use of the school district, would lessen what we would be able to make available to other.
And I would like to know if, say, of the Volcano stadium is a possibility and, from Salem baseball.
Yeah, it's something we did, you know, I have been trying to do synthetic turf for the high school since 2017. We asked them in 2017, they said no, and amongst many other fields at the time, Willamette said no too, in 2017. This go around, a big chunk of that is, that's a large stadium, and the rental fees are things we can't afford, for our purpose, right? Our focus also was on doing something for Salem, so that factored in. And another focus of it was, how do we do a baseball and a softball field, right? Because they're not separated. This project was meant to do both for equity purposes. And so at Volcanoes, that's not possible. They just have the one sport. So how do we get both fields? We talked about Gear Park. Rob knows that I've been in his office bugging him about it years ago. But it was trying to find a space that was centrally located. So Sprague can come, my alma mater, McKay, can come, and it's all conveniently located for them to be able to access the space. So those were all big factors into the space. And you know, if you read articles, what's really neat, the Volcanoes have talked about they have 4 teams now that play there, and they play kind of a round robin almost every single day. And they have Corbin University that rents it. They, rent it out to Blanchette, Shamawa uses it. And so there was an article written that they're booked through Labor Day, just right now. Would they make room for my group if we paid a pretty penny? Maybe. That may be an option, but we A, couldn't afford it, and B, it doesn't help the school district.
I think that's the part, right? When we sat down and we started having this conversation, it was like, how do we bring a turf baseball and softball to the same? Because it didn't exist when we started having this conversation. Last year, we played softball games at Staten. We've gone up to Canby. We've gone down to St. Anne Christian. We've gone and played baseball games at Linfield, George Fox, and Pacific in our conference, which that's a great recruiting tool, and go and play somebody else's home for a home game. So how do we make this possible? Like I said before, I'm also the person that gets calls from folks that want to use our facilities, and I try to accommodate them as much as I can. And having to say no because we don't. But hey, well, where's the nearest turf field? Well, you have to 20 miles away. There are high schools in the state of Oregon that have more turf fields at that high school than all of Salem Kaiser School District. It is a disservice to our students. And so that's where we started and what we were trying to do and trying to come together. And how can we make this happen? How can we make this work?
We've come a long way from the Salem or the Salem Dodgers or the Salem Senators. Single A baseball that played at Holland Field.
Yes.
I'm gonna follow up on that kind of line of thought there in terms of use and wondering, if I can kick it over to Laura, kind of what's the anticipated use for the school district here and where, how many home games are we playing not at home across the school district, right, as a result of not having that turf field, right? What's the,
Sure.
can you kind of speak to that level of engagement and opportunity presented to the school district there?
Yeah, well, if the weather is like it is, at least when we walked in today, I don't know what it is right now, but if it's a decent spring, we get to play at home, right? And so if it's a decent spring, our preference would be to play on our home fields rather than because of home field advantage, right? But if the spring is like it was last spring or the spring before, we were getting last minute charter buses and going to the opponents' fields because most of the schools around the state, a lot of our opponents at the 6A level have turf. And typically our own school buses couldn't get us there at the last minute, so it would cost us quite a bit of money. We were really thrilled to be asked to be a part of this project and work with Rob and Luke and their teams because they were able to find a way for us to be involved in this project without having to invest any money. And you all know our school district couldn't invest any money. And so, but due to their, abilities and their efforts, we are able to get 10 years of free use of their baseball and softball fields. The plan is on Mondays, they don't practice. So on Mondays, we would be able to use their fields as soon as our kids got out of school, up until whenever the lights need to be turned off. And so depending on how much time that is, it's possible we can fit in a couple softball games, certainly at least one baseball game, possibly a baseball game, two softball games over on the softball field, at least one baseball game, if not two, depending on how late the lights need to be turned off. On Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, we'd be able to get one game in at each facility. And then on every other Friday and Saturday, the Willamette is not in town. And so on every other Friday and Saturday, we would have full use of their fields as well. So that's during baseball and softball season. We see if it's raining, we see a lot of use. If it's not raining, we don't see very much use at all. It depends. We will also though towards, the end of the season, even if it's not raining, our teams would like to use the field for practice because the ball bounces differently on turf than it does on natural grass. And so as our teams are preparing for the playoffs, we would be be using the field during our time slots just to prepare for the playoffs.
Those are typically at times where our season's actually done, right?
Yeah.
And so, we wouldn't even be out there.
And host playoff games.
Right, finally, yeah, it would be nice to be able to host playoff games in town, so.
Can I follow up on that? You listed a bunch of potential users, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, and so just thinking about school district, your own usage. Can you just walk us through a little bit about how that works, and is that basically every day of the week that there's gonna be multiple users at all times? It seems like a good problem to have a lot of interest, but how do you balance all that?
Yeah, and I think that's good, and Luke's had a lot of those conversations, and so he may speak to this a little bit. I think a lot of the conversations have been summer use, and kind of during the day, essentially, for when I think we heard earlier, right? There's summer programs that are going away, and so there's other youth organizations that are trying to organize those summer programs, and they can use this space for different things. Again, there's a lot of flexibility in a baseball field. Specifically, we've talked with Special Olympics, who uses Phillips Field right now quite a bit for their softball. Not a great, nothing is Phillips Field, not a consistent surface all the time. So the idea to be able to use our softball field with turf and a consistent playing surface really appeals to the Special Olympics in the summer for those uses. They use our other spaces for things throughout the year, right? They're gonna host a track meet, they do swimming at our place, they've done basketball tryouts at our facility. So that's one of those things. One groups we haven't really talked to yet are the Little Leagues, right? Didn't wanna, and so, but I think that's always an option. Those are the groups I hear most from. Hey, I've got a Little League team that, we wanna use your batting cages, we wanna use your field, because the parks are wet and muddy, and when they start, and it's like, yeah, so is our field. And so, and some of that is, we won't really know until we get there, in some capacities.
I guess a follow-up question, we've heard about this from some of the comments, parking. Just limited parking as it exists right now, knowing that there are a lot of users that go there for other purposes. Can you talk about your plan for that? I guess just to proceed, one point you might make is thinking about folks parking on Willamette campus potentially. Would that also apply to some of these private users or users that are not Willamette affiliate, like school district, Boys and Girls Club, Special Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and some of that too, right? We're looking at what parking is available. We have some conversations that we still need to have. One with Salem Health and right across the street in terms of that's not a conversation I can have. That's our CFO is having those conversations, see what might be possible for nights and weekends when folks aren't parking those spaces. The nice thing is we look at specifically for summer baseball is we're not in school. And so we do, as I shared with folks yesterday in our walk, when we ever host Linfield's the kind of the one football game where we know we're gonna get a bunch of people. And so we do shuttle people from our campus in those situations, or encourage them to walk. I think once we try to explain that it's really not that far, especially to a north entrance, it's very feasible, so.
Just a follow-up question on that is, have you talked with Chariots at all about thinking about bus service and expanding dedicated lanes or dedicated lines or routes rather?
So we haven't had that conversation, I've looked at the bus routes, and I think one of the things we've talked about is approaching them and saying, you know, for our events, and again, I can't speak for, you know, when Luke is a renter of our space, that's a decision, that's something we can have control over. Do we say, if you show your bus ticket, I don't even know if there are bus tickets anymore, right? It's probably on a phone. You show your pass, you show your ticket, you get money off your, you get money off your admission. So we're trying to encourage people. We'll do that sometimes at our events with different things. If you do something, we'll give you free popcorn, right? Less cost than yours, $3 off, but something to encourage folks. We've also had conversations about, as we, on our space, making sure that we have bike racks available, encourage people to ride their bikes. So we have not had that conversation, but we have thought about it as another way to encourage folks to get to the park.
I guess I think the incentive is great, but also just thinking, could there be almost like a bus added in terms of I don't know what the cost ends up being, but could they add a route that says, this is a busy time, if you're already chartering buses for certain games, et cetera. I feel like that is one of those user conflicts that's going to be most apparent is if people come to park and you have games throughout the day of the summer, then that's going to show up pretty quickly. So I think that I know Cherry's been doing a lot of great work expanding, so I'm very excited.
And I would just add that there are 4 bus routes that touch Bush Park in a way, and they do run late into the evening. So those are great options, just because it already exists. Right?
Yeah. But I do appreciate maybe a special bus, right? Like a game day bus.
Yeah.
That runs from, it's a certain parking lot that it picks up out on Center Street at the mall for people that are coming from that direction.
In the interest of time, we're going to cut off the questions there. However, what I will do is invite the board to send in questions to Rob. That Rob.
And then hopefully they come to me.
Or myself or both. And we'll get those questions kind of compiled. To Leanne, send them to Leanne, please. Send those questions to Leanne. We'll get those compiled and consolidated in a way where they aren't duplicative, but that way we can get them all together about this project. Because I know there's a lot of, as we've heard in public, there's a lot of various things to consider here and a lot of moving parts. And as we get moved through the various planning processes and conversations that all the various parties are having on this, I want to make sure we stay informed on it. So let's get those questions in over the next week, say a week, and we can get make sure we have, because I know there's more things that'll come up as well in our minds as we're thinking about this. But I do want to recognize we are already at the end of our agenda time. And so we're gonna move on. Thank you very much, Rob, for that discussion. Thanks for all the public comments during that time. In the interest of not going too far over our agenda, I'm going to table 5C, our neighborhood association outreach assignments, till the next meeting. And I'm going to skip right ahead to Marine's here for Mission Street, right? Yeah, I'm gonna skip right ahead to the information reports. Maureen, if you are still on there, and can provide the Parks Conservancy quarterly report update for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Sorry to keep you waiting. Thank you for your patience. We'll turn it over to you for now.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
We can. Is there a way we can get that turned up just a little bit? Give us 3 seconds.
Okay, sounds good.
Rob's gonna crank the volume a little.
Oh, okay. Apologies that I couldn't be there in person today. I'm up in Portland. Maureen McGee with the Mission Street Parks Conservancy. In the interest of time, I'll just refer you to our written report, written quarterly report, which should be in your packet. it is the beginning of gardening season for us, so we've been really excited to get back in the park. The one big highlight is we've made a lot of progress on the woodland garden, which is a new garden feature that we're adding to a previously kind of unused part of Bush Park across the street from, or across the way, excuse me, from the Bush House. If you haven't had a chance to see it, you should stop by. It's looking really lovely. The only other thing I'll add, just to flag for the advisory committee, the Mission Street Parks Conservancy has also been following the conversations about Willamette baseball and chatting with members of our organization and talking amongst the board. So I just wanted to highlight for you that we are also a stakeholder who intends to, who has engaged. We've had conversations with Rob and Luke. We've done a walkthrough. We continue to engage and look forward to being an important part of those conversations. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Maureen. Appreciate that, and I'm sure we'll be interested in the Conservancy's perspectives on that issue as well. Any questions about the report? All right. The other reports are mostly all written reports in there. Any questions about those? Did you want to make your date correction?
Yes, thank you. Quick correction on item 10 in the division's report. That's the Minto Brown parking lot pavings. Just those two last bullets there on the dates are inaccurate. So parking lot 2, we hope is going to be completed and will reopen to use the week of June 3rd. And we believe the parking lot 3 will be completed, at least our hope is they'll be completed by July 15th. Corrections on that.
Any other questions about the written reports?
Very small update and kudos I wanted to give, so
We are gonna skip right to new business, so kudos away.
more of a board member update, but just wanted to say two things. One is I was at Chicha Brewing and there was Punks with Purpose, is a group I had not heard of, a nonprofit in Salem. They do a Punks in the Park. They do outreach to at-risk youth in Salem. They talked about their park event and they mentioned Becky was someone that they worked with a lot, who's just done a really great job. So just wanted to give some praise there, that they were really appreciative of you by name and just how much you've worked with them and helped them out. So kudos there. Second is in West Salem, Yola Ridge has a beautiful new sign and I just want to say how nice that looks. And so appreciate you all doing that.
Let's give you more.
Excellent. Any other general updates, thoughts from the board?
I'd like to acknowledge the fact that it's really good to see the shrubs going in planted at Orchard Heights Park. I saw today there are a bunch of salmon berries and other riparian bushes that were planted in there recently, and it's looking good.
Excellent. Thank you, Al. All right, well, action items coming out of this meeting. I'm gonna write a letter in support of the grant. The letter I wrote at our last meeting, you authorized me to write another letter that was included in one of the addendums. We had several. One of the addendums in there was in there just for the record, so you can see that. So I will write another letter there, and then sending in your questions on the ball field project. I think those are our two action items. We will talk next month about neighborhood assignments. We might try to get something out before next month about that as well, just so we can get those, start getting those on the calendars. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Rick, second?
Second.
Dylan, and all those in